Okay, here I am with Matt Townsley, and I'm very excited to be talking with him today. I'm a fourth grade teacher in California, and Matt, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and your role in education?
Sure, yeah. My name is Matt Townsley. I am a district administrator in Solon, Iowa, which is our school district's about 1,500 students, K-12. And so in our school district, we have an elementary principal, middle school principal, a high school principal, a superintendent, and myself, and then activities director. So we're the six-person administrative team. I'll be starting my 7th year as a district administrator, and prior to that, I taught high school math for 6 years, also in this school district.
Great, thanks. Yeah, my wife is a high school math teacher, so
Cool.
it's a tough job you guys have.
Fun. Cool, cool, cool.
Well, anyways, let's get straight to it. Main reason I'm interviewing you today is because my school is going more in the direction of a standards-based learning, lesson planning, assessing, and grading approach.
Sure.
And I found you on Twitter and articles you wrote on the web, and just wanted to pick your brain more about standards-based grading so that I can do it more confidently and, with some research-based information, and hopefully avoid some of the pitfalls that some schools and districts have had with it.
Sure.
Anyways, how would you define standards-based grading?
Yeah, so standards-based grading or standards-based reporting is a philosophy of reporting student work that reports students' learning or their strengths and weaknesses based on specific course or state or grade level standards, rather than by assessment. So, as you think about the typical way of reporting out, you might say a kid got a 85% on the Chapter 3 math test. Instead of reporting out 83% on the Chapter 3 math test, instead we're going to break down that Chapter 3 math test into the specific standards that students were supposed to have learned. We're going to report out individually on how well Johnny understood Concept 1, how well Johnny understood Concept 2, Concept 3, Concept 4, for example, so that students and parents and teachers have a better understanding of what Johnny's relative strengths and weaknesses are. There's also more of an emphasis in standards-based grading reporting on students being provided multiple opportunities to demonstrate their understanding. So the idea here is that if you were to ask, teacher, do you believe that students learn at different rates and different paces? Every teacher I know says, heck yeah, they sure do. And so how do we create a reporting system that really honors the fact that students do learn at different rates and different paces? And so there's a philosophy in standards-based grading reporting that tries to do a better job honoring the fact that students do learn at different rates and different paces. And finally, I would say, in addition to just being the reporting side of things and the philosophy matching what we know about student learning, the third aspect of standards-based grading reporting is that academics are reported separately from behaviors. And so on a typical elementary standards-based report card, in addition to Johnny's parents and Johnny seeing how well Johnny did on the Chapter 3 test that's been broken down into multiple standards, we'd also see how well Johnny's doing on working well with others, or listening to directions, whatever the behavior type standards are as well.
So when you give the report to parents, it doesn't just show the content standards and skills, but it also has a separate place where it talks about their behavior and their team building skills. And
Yep. Yeah. So the academics are kind of one aspect of the report card, and then there's I'd call the non-academics, or the work habits, or the citizenship, whatever you want to call them, are reported out separately. And so kind of one myth or misnomer about standards-based reporting is that the students' soft skills don't matter anymore. Well, actually they do matter. They're just reported separately. Sometimes where it gets kind of where the message sometimes isn't always as clear, and it is in more of a secondary setting, where Sometimes in a secondary setting, like in our high school, we still convert all of those academic standards to a letter grade. And so when a parent logs into the, the online grading system, they see the tests and quizzes, or the tests and projects and essays all broken down into standards, but then we still report out a letter grade on the transcript as well. Whereas in our elementary setting, we don't do that. The parents just see the standards themselves. And so in our experience, in our opinion, it becomes more controversial at the secondary setting because parents and students are more interested in the letter grades, and less controversial or perhaps less challenging at the elementary level because letter grades aren't as important. But again, the emphasis there is that both bits of information are communicated to parents and students, both academics and non-academics.
Is there more of a rub in the secondary setting because of colleges needing letter grades and percentages to receive students?
Yep, that's an aspect of it, and that's why we continue to convert the standards to letter grades. Also, there is an aspect of parents, and this is just our experience in the high school setting in particular. Parents are concerned not as much about other kids as they are their own kids, and so they may see it as maybe not fair or not right when their kid does well the first time, and then another kid has multiple opportunities to demonstrate their understanding, and then they get the same grade as their son or daughter. And they're like, well, what? My kid's smarter than that kid because my kid got it the first time, but they both end up with the A in biology class. And so they see potentially that that their kid doesn't have the same amount of access to scholarships or that type of thing, that kind of the competitive side of schooling. That's one way we've seen it. And then another way is just change is challenging. And so when change happens, parents go to Google, and Google has some good stuff out there about standards-based grading, but it also has some challenging things about it. And so if a parent or if a student is frustrated, then a parent gets frustrated, and a parent goes to Google and starts finding stuff, and they don't necessarily think through whether the things they see on Google are necessarily being played out or not in their specific kid's school. That's, again, just our experience.
How do you respond to the following argument? Critics argue that students discourage students from trying hard because they are not as motivated to strive for a P, as in proficient, as they are to work for an A. One Albuquerque, New Mexico parent contended that a standards-based grading system, quote, teaches kids just to try for the minimum. Do you really want our future doctors and engineers just trying to pass, end quote?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'd say a couple different things. First of all is that, again, in our secondary setting, those standards are still converted to a letter grade. And so kids still are trying to get an A or a B or whatever grade they want. It's just a little bit different game to get there. It used to be a game of how many extra credit crossword puzzles can I complete? How many homework assignments do I need to copy to turn in to get my grade up? There's all these different games they played before to try to get the grade that they wanted. And now there's a different game. There's no way we can take the gaming out of it. It's kids just figure out a different game. It's now the different game is based upon I have to understand or demonstrate understanding of these standards, because in our system, homework doesn't count towards the final grade. It's just practice. And so kids can't just turn in a bunch of homework assignments and try to pad their grade that way. And there's no such thing as extra credit. When kids ask about extra credit, we say, hey, we don't have extra credit here as we used to have it. Now we have it as you have multiple opportunities to learn the stuff you were supposed to have learned before. And so the first thing I'd say to that quote is that we still do convert to letter grades. And so kids still are, whether or not, we can't necessarily control their motivation. We can't just all of a sudden force a kid who just tries to get D's in the old system to try to get A's in the new system. And so student motivation is student motivation. It's a separate kind of entity that this grading system isn't necessarily designed to all of a sudden be a silver bullet for. So, and then the second thing is it's funny that you asked that question, because an outsider recently came into our school and completed a dissertation. Literally, I received a hardbound copy of the defended dissertation earlier this month. And what this person did, and it was a person from a different state, they came and interviewed like 7 or 8 teachers from our high school and myself and our high school principal. And kind of his his idea, it was a qualitative study, was to find out, did student motivation increase as a result of moving to standards-based grading? And what he found out is that it didn't increase at all. There were kids before that were unmotivated, that even in this standards-based grading system, they weren't motivated at all. And so there wasn't necessarily a magic light bulb that turned on for a bunch of kids as we moved towards this. So I wouldn't say that standards-based grading leads to reduced student motivation. I would reframe that sentence to say that standards-based grading is not the end-all be-all to increasing student motivation. There are all kinds of strategies and things that we do as educators to try to motivate kids that are really outside the realm of this standards-based grading thing. Just like developing a positive relationship with kids can be a motivator for some kids. Just knowing that there's an adult that cares about them can be a motivator for them. And you can do that with or without some innovative grading system. And then the last thing I'd say in relation to this quote is that where it says that it teaches kids just to try for the minimum. Well, it really depends on how your standards-based grading system is set up. You know, in some systems, in our system, for example, what we said is, in order to get an A on a test before, in biology class, for example, what did it take? Well, kids had to know the stuff. So in our standards-based grading system now, in order to get an A on the test, except the test is now broken down by standards, they have to know the same stuff. And so what we tell our parents is to get an A on a test, although you don't ever see an A on the test in the grade book, it's the same as it was before. Now you just see it more specifically broken down. And so I would suggest that it's actually harder for our students to get an A now than it was before. It's the same to get an A on a test, except they don't have the homework and the extra credit stuff to pad their grade anymore like they did before. For some students, though, it's actually easier to get an A. It's for those high-achieving students that just always did well on the tests and sloughed off the homework, and they said, I'll just lose a few points on the homework, and all of a sudden they're getting an A-. Well, now they don't have to do that, but that's very few students. It's actually harder for more kids to get an A now, at least in our system, because of the way it's set up.
And because in the past, students could cram and study right before a test and do good on a test and not have to remember really after that. But now with needing to show evidence of mastery of a standard, I can see why that's harder. And speaking of which, I haven't really been able to figure it out in my head since our school year hasn't started yet, but how does a teacher and a parent and a student know when a student has mastered a standard? How is that measured?
That's a really great question. I think the first answer is not necessarily one that's very practical. But as I've done workshops with teachers, both in Iowa and outside of Iowa, this question comes up. And my, kind of somewhat sarcastic response is, hold on, could you show me your teacher credential here? Oh, you are certified to teach 4th grade in the state of California. Therefore, the California Board of Educational Examiners, or whatever you guys call it over there, in Iowa, we call it the Iowa Board of Educational Examiners, they have vested in you the qualification of knowing exactly what it is for a 4th grader to get it, because I'm not qualified to teach 4th grade. I'm not certified to do that. I'm not certified to teach high school biology. I'm certified to teach high school math, and so I'm supposed to be the one that knows what it's like for a kid to understand Pythagorean's theorem, or to master Pythagorean's theorem, or to master whatever it is in math. And so the answer doesn't rely on the district office, at least in our district, making that up. It's specifically the teachers doing that. So again, that's kind of my sarcastic answer. My more practical answer is we get teachers together. So in your case, we'd get 4th grade teachers together, and we do this. We get our 4th grade teachers together, and we say, all right, here's one of the standards. You bring some work from your 4th grade kids. You bring some work from your 4th grade kids. You bring some work from your 4th grade kids. You bring some work from your 4th grade kids. Let's say there's 4 sections of 4th grade. They'll get together and they just look at the student work, and they'll create piles. Okay, they'll say on this standard, we think that this pile over here is evidence of kids really getting it. This pile over here is kids kind of getting it, and kind of down the line. And then let's create kind of a rubric that matches that. And so it's kind of backwards. We don't always create the rubric ahead of time. We create the rubric based on what students have known and demonstrated in relation to the standard. And so what evidence do we see of that here in this awesome pile over here? Let's create kind of a rubric for that. And then that rubric we can use to kind of do some inter-rater reliability. It's not very scientific, but those are the types of things that we do. It would be great if the state just came down and said, here's exactly what mastery looks like for every single standard. But they haven't done that, at least in Iowa. And then secondly, it also takes some of the ownership at the local level out. I found that when there's local ownership in the process, that teachers are more likely to be interested in it, although it takes more time. If somebody else did it, it's easier to be critical of it. But if I was a part of the process, it's less likely to be critical of it. So what that means is that sometimes it's a one-shot deal, one attempt at a very well-constructed, project or essay or prompt can be it. Other times it's, well, we think that kids should be able to do this, 5 times in a row, spread out of 2 weeks or something like that. It really depends on the standard, how the standard's written, and what our teachers come up with. It also depends too on the cognitive complexity of the standard. Some of the standards are written at a very low level on Bloom's taxonomy, and some standards are written at a higher level on Bloom's or Webb's depth of knowledge. So that comes into play as to what we really are looking at in the area of a student mastering a standard. I know that's not a very concrete answer, but it's the best kind of nuanced response I can provide to that answer.
That doesn't make it any easier to implement it. But yeah, I've been talking with my vice principal, and he has some ideas to it, which sounds similar to what you have done.